You know how people say home is just a place? Yeah, whoever said that never had to sign away the keys to theirs. I can still smell the faint scent of coffee in that apartment. Not the fresh kind, but the kind that lingers after years. Of slow mornings and unwashed mugs in the sink. That little place wasn't much. One bedroom with creaky floors and a view of the neighbor's laundry line. But it was mine. It was where I figured out how to cook without burning pasta. Where I sat up at 2 a.m. watching the city lights blink like they were winking at me. When I signed the papers to sell it. My hand shook. Not from nerves, at least that's what I told myself, but from this deep, gnawing ache that started somewhere behind my ribs. The lawyer slid the documents toward me like it was no big deal. Just another transaction, another Tuesday. But to me, it was like carving off a piece of myself and handing it over in exchange for something I couldn't hold yet. And that something was my brother's voice in my ear saying, "We can't lose the restaurant." We grew up in that place. Our parents' pride and joy. It's the clinking of plates, the smell of garlic and butter in the air, the sound of Dad laughing with regular customers. That was home long before I ever had an apartment. When Dad passed and Mom's health started slipping, the restaurant became more than just a business. It was the last thread holding our family story together. So when the bills stacked higher, then the ceiling and the bank threatened to take it all. I didn't hesitate, or at least I told myself I didn't. Blood over bricks, right? Family first. I remember walking out of that apartment for the last time. The walls looked bare, stripped of every picture frame and shelf. My footsteps echoed in a way they never had before. I locked the door, slid the keys into the landlord's hand, and thought, well, there goes my safe place. The next stop was the restaurant. I pushed the door open, and the familiar chime rang out. That soft, cheerful ding that always made me feel like I was walking into a memory. My brother was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, grinning like he knew I'd come through. He clapped me on the back and said, "You won't regret this." At that moment, I believed him. God help me, I really did. It's funny, the night after I sold my apartment, I didn't feel like I'd lost anything. If anything, I felt lighter, like I'd just done something noble. Something worth the ache in my chest. My brother and I stayed late at the restaurant that night. The place was closed, chairs stacked on tables. It's the only light coming from the small lamp in the corner booth where we always sat to plan. We had 2 mugs of tea between us, steam curling up into the air like little ghosts. He looked at me with that grin he gets when he's trying to hide something emotional. You know, the one where his mouth is smiling, but his eyes are softer than usual. "We're going to do this together," he said. Not, "We'll try," not, "I hope." We're gonna. We started tossing around ideas for a new seasonal menu, sketching dishes on napkins. I suggested rosemary chicken. He suggested lamb shanks. I laughed because I'd never cooked lamb shanks in my life, but he insisted, "We'll learn. We've always figured things out." Somewhere in the middle of it all, we burned toast in the kitchen because neither of us remembered we'd even put bread in the oven. The smoke alarm went off. We both swore loudly and ended up waving a towel in the air, laughing until our sides hurt. For a moment, it was like we were kids again, sneaking into the kitchen after hours, trying to fry eggs without waking Mom. That night, as we locked up, he clapped his hand on my shoulder. "We'll make Dad proud," he said quietly. "I won't let you down." And the thing about promises like that, you don't think about whether they're realistic. You just take them, tuck them away in your heart, and believe them.
Yes.
Because it's your brother. Because it's family. Looking back now, I realize those words weren't just a promise. They were the last good thing I'd believed from him. The first signs were so small. I almost convinced myself I was imagining them at first. It was just the way my brother would step outside to take phone calls instead of answering them in front of me. He'd come back in with that same casual smile, saying things like, "Just supplier stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." I'd nod, because why wouldn't I trust him? Then there were the invoices. At the start, we had this unspoken system. I'd handle the kitchen inventory. He'd manage the accounts. Simple. But every now and then, a supplier would drop off a bill and say, "Hey, this one's overdue." I'd frown because I knew I'd transferred the money last week. When I asked him about it, he'd wave me off. Yeah, I'm on it. I told myself it was just stress. Running a restaurant is a constant fire to put out. Maybe he was just overwhelmed. But the real gut punch came one evening when I was cleaning tables after close. He was at the bar, flipping through the new menus. Only they weren't the ones we'd worked on together. Gone was the rosemary chicken, the lamb shanks, in their place. A whole different lineup dishes I hadn't even heard of, much less approved. When did we decide to change the menu? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He didn't even look up. It's just a trial run. I'm testing some new ideas without telling me. Finally, he looked at me, and for just a second, there was something sharp in his eyes. Like I'd stepped into a room I wasn't supposed to be in. It's my job to make the tough calls, he said flatly, then went back to his papers. That night I stayed later than usual, wiping the same table 3 times just to avoid going home. In the quiet, I could hear him in the back, talking on the phone again. His voice low, his laugh short and clipped. Not the easy laugh I knew, but something colder. I remember standing there, rag in hand, wondering when exactly my brother had. Started feeling like a stranger. It happened so quietly. I didn't even realize it was happening until I was already standing on the outside. At first, it was little things. Meetings with suppliers that I didn't need to be at. Staff. Schedules that were already handled. I'd walk in on conversations that would stop mid-sentence. My brother would smile, pat the bar, and say, "Don't worry about it. You've got enough on your plate." I told myself maybe he was just trying to take some weight off me. That's what you do for family, right? You help each other, but helping and pushing someone out. Those are 2 very different things. The day it really hit me, I'd come in early to prep for lunch service. The door to the back office, our office, was locked. At first, I thought maybe he'd just stepped out and forgotten to leave it open. So I grabbed the spare key from under the register. But when I slid it into the lock, it didn't fit. He'd changed it. When I finally found him in the kitchen, I asked what was going on. "Oh, that? Yeah, it's just temporary," he said, like it was nothing. "We're reorganizing some files. You'll get your key back in a few days." I just stood there staring at him. Temporary. That word tasted bitter in my mouth, you have to understand. That office wasn't just a room with a desk. It was where Dad used to keep a jar of peppermints for customers' kids, where Mom would sneak in during busy nights, roll her eyes, and leave us cups of tea without saying a word. It was the heartbeat of the restaurant. And suddenly, I wasn't. Allowed in. For the rest of that day, everything felt off. The clatter of pans in the kitchen sounded harsher. The smell of garlic, usually warm and comforting, felt heavy, like it was hanging in the air too long. Even the regulars seemed quieter, glancing between us like they could feel something brewing. That night, as I wiped down the counters, I caught my brother watching me, not with anger, not even with guilt, but with this calm, unreadable expression, like he'd already decided something. I just wasn't in on it yet. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those dull, gray days, where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or just hang low and heavy. I was restocking the pantry when I heard the door chime. It was Mr. Khan, one of our oldest suppliers. He'd been delivering to the restaurant since I was a teenager, always with a box of fresh herbs and a story about his kids. We chatted while I signed for the delivery. The usual small talk. But then he hesitated, glancing around like he was checking if we were alone. "So, you're going ahead with the new name?" he asked. I froze mid-signature. "What new name?" He frowned. "Your brother didn't tell you? He's setting up a rebrand deal. New signage, new menus, even a launch event. I thought you both were in on it." My mouth went dry. I managed a stiff smile, handed him the sign sheet, and said something like, "Oh, right. Yeah," but my head was spinning so hard, I barely heard him leave. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The air was damp, heavy with the promise of rain. My phone was in my hand, but I didn't call my brother. Instead, I just walked to my car, got in, and sat there. And that's when the flashbacks started hitting, one after the other, like little film reels spooling too fast to me, sitting in the lawyer's office, signing away my apartment, him clapping my shoulder, saying, "You won't regret this." The late-night menu sketches on napkins, the burnt toast, the tea in the corner booth, all of it. And now he was putting his name, only his name, on the thing I'd given up my home to save. My chest tightened so much I had to roll down the window just to breathe. That's when the rain finally started, big heavy drops splattering against the windshield, smearing the reflection of the restaurant's neon sign into something unrecognizable. I sat there,
Watching the water distort the letters.
and thought, maybe that's all I've been to him, a blur in the background of his big plan. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying Mr. Khan's words over and over until they weren't just words anymore. They were proof. Proof that I hadn't been paranoid. Proof that my brother had been moving me out of the picture, piece by piece. By morning, I wasn't even angry yet. I was sharp, focused. I walked into the restaurant and found him at the counter, flipping through invoices like nothing was wrong. "We need to talk," I said. He glanced up, already impatient. "I'm busy now." The staff in the kitchen went quiet. Even the espresso machine hissed like it was listening. I asked him straight out about the rebrand. No soft lead-in, no dancing around it. Just the truth, dropped like a stone between us. He didn't even flinch. "Yeah, I'm rebranding. The place needs a fresh start without me." I asked. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated that he could hear it. He shrugged, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "You've been distracted. You don't have the same vision anymore. I can't have dead weight right now." Dead weight. Something in me snapped. I reminded him loudly that I sold my apartment for this, that I'd trusted him when no one else believed the restaurant could be saved. I threw every late night, every menu brainstorm, every moment of sacrifice right in his face. But instead of even a flicker of remorse, he leaned in, lowered his voice, and said, "You didn't save it for me. You did it for yourself. And now, you're in my way." It wasn't just the words. It was the cold certainty in his tone. He wasn't confused. He wasn't acting out of desperation. He had made his choice, and it didn't include me. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the kind that makes your hands shake. Old resentment started bubbling up, the way he'd always taken credit for my ideas growing up. The way Mom had to smooth things over when he'd hurt people. The way he'd walk ahead like I was just supposed to follow. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed. The short, sharp sound that didn't feel like mine. "Fine," I said. "You want it all? You can have it. But don't think for a second I'm just going to disappear." He smirked, that same smirk he used to give when he thought he'd outsmarted me as a kid, and said, "We'll see." That's when I knew. This wasn't a fight I could win by yelling. I'd have to take everything he'd built on my sacrifice and pull it out from under him. Quietly after that day, I stopped arguing. I stopped asking questions. I stopped showing up the way I used to. If he thought I was dead weight, then fine, I'd let him think I was drifting away. But behind the scenes, that's when the work really started. Every night after the restaurant closed, I'd sit at my kitchen table, the one thing from my apartment I refused to leave behind. With my laptop glowing under the dim light of a desk lamp, the rest of the apartment was dark, silent except for the low hum of the fridge. I started collecting things, old contracts with suppliers, copies of invoices, screenshots of emails where I was CC'd on decisions, proof that I was part of the ownership and operations, not just a helper passing through. I reached out to staff quietly. One by one, under the guise of catching up, over coffee or in the parking lot after closing, I'd ask small, careful questions. And people talked, not loudly, but enough. I learned about suppliers who'd been pushed out, deals that had gone bad, bills that hadn't been paid, all under his new vision. Every little scrap of information went into a neatly organized folder on my computer. Names, dates, receipts, the kind of details that, on their own, might look like nothing but put together. They painted a very clear picture. The strangest part was how calm I felt. I wasn't pacing or losing sleep. Wasn't even fantasizing about the confrontation anymore. I just worked. Like I was setting dominoes in a line, knowing that one day, all I'd have to do was tap the first one. From the outside, It probably looked like I was giving up. I let him have his meetings, make his changes, take the spotlight. Oh, I smiled in front of the staff, I played along. Every time he smirked at me like I'd already lost, I had to fight the urge to thank him for underestimating me. Because if there's one thing my brother never learned, it's this. You don't burn someone who's already walked through fire for you. They know how to stand in the smoke without choking. When the time came, it wasn't dramatic. No grand speeches, no yelling in the middle of the dining room. Just quiet steps, one after the other. The first call I made was to the landlord. I still had a copy of the lease, with both our names on it. I explained politely that I had concerns about unpaid rent and operational changes I hadn't approved. I didn't demand anything. I just asked if we could review the terms together. That was the first domino. Next were the suppliers I'd known for years, the ones who'd trusted. My family long before my brother started talking about fresh starts. I showed them my documentation, dates, invoices, payment delays. Didn't have to tell them what to do, just made sure they saw the whole picture. Then came the business partners. Dad had brought in during the early years silent investors who'd stayed quiet because they thought everything was fine. They weren't fine anymore. It was like planting seeds in different fields, all at once. Nothing looked different at first. But I knew the roots were spreading, and through it all, I stayed calm. I made my calls in the mornings, met people in coffee shops in the afternoons, and came home at night to file more documents. Every conversation ended with the same quiet smirk on my face, not because I enjoyed it, but because it felt like I was finally pulling the brakes on a runaway train. The final move was slipping a certain folder full of timelines receipts and witness statements to someone I knew would put it in front of exactly the right eyes. Not mine, not the police, but someone in the business network who'd make sure his reputation took the hit before the restaurant ever closed. By the time my brother noticed, it was already too late. It started small, the kind of hiccups he could explain away. A shipment delayed here. A staff member quitting there. But the thing about small cracks is, once they start, they spread fast. Within 2 weeks, 3 of our longest-running suppliers pulled out. They didn't make a scene. They just stopped delivering. No fresh produce. No specialty spices. The kitchen started running on substitutions, and regulars noticed. The staff followed. First, the line cook who'd been with us since Dad's days, then the weekend hostess who could remember every customer's name. Didn't leave with angry words. They left with tired smiles and short goodbyes. It's the quiet exits that hurt the most, because they mean the person's already mourned the loss before walking out the door. And the debts, oh, they came in like waves. The landlord, now fully aware of the unpaid rent, sent formal notices. Investors started asking for their money back. The rebrand launch he'd been planning, the glossy new signage he'd ordered, it's never even made it out of the box. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Every time I walked past the restaurant, I saw it happening in real time. Fewer tables filled, less laughter spilling out onto the sidewalk. The once bright glow of the windows started looking dim, even when the lights were on. The last time I stepped inside, the chairs were stacked on the tables, and the place smelled wrong. Not like garlic and fresh bread, but like damp wood and stale air. My footsteps echoed on the tile. Somewhere in the back, a single door slammed, sharp and final. I didn't need to see him to know how he looked. Shoulders tight, clenched. Probably blaming everyone but himself. And maybe that was the real win. Not that the restaurant was slipping through his fingers, but that he finally had to sit in the empty space he'd created. I always thought that, when this day came, I'd feel something bigger: triumph, satisfaction, maybe even revenge. But standing there on the sidewalk, looking at the shuttered windows of the restaurant, all I felt was stillness. The sign above the door was gone. Just a blank space where the name used to be. The windows were dusty, a thin film dulling what had once been warm and alive inside. The door was locked, the same way it had been for me that morning when he changed the key. Only now, no one had a way in. I saved this place once, sold my home for it, breathed life back into it when the walls were closing in. And for a while I believed that sacrifice meant something, that family loyalty was a currency that never devalued turns. Out, I was wrong. But here's the thing. I didn't just lose my apartment in all this. I lost the version of myself that thought blood automatically meant trust. I lost the naive belief that people will honor the things you've given up for them. And in a strange way, that loss feels like freedom. I didn't fight to take the restaurant back. I didn't try to salvage what was left. Some things aren't worth saving twice, especially when the people inside them can't be saved with it. So I walked past, didn't stop, didn't take a last look, just kept moving because the real win wasn't watching it close. It was knowing I could finally let it go without letting it take me with it.